Usually when we look at like a famous centuries-old painting in a museum, there is this expectation of permanence.
Right, yeah, like it's set in stone.
Exactly. You see the masterpiece, the brushstrokes are dry, the frame is gilded, and you just accept that what you are looking at is the final, undeniable vision of the artist.
It presents itself as a completed artifact, like the illusion of a singular moment of creation.
Yeah, the image is static. It has arrived.
Yeah.
But then an art restorer comes along, takes that painting into a lab, and runs it under an X-ray machine.
Oh, and that changes everything.
Totally. Or they use infrared reflectography, and suddenly that solid, permanent image just shatters.
Because you see what's underneath.
Right. Underneath the serene landscape, the X-ray reveals the pentimento, the underlying layers.
The mistakes and the redos.
Exactly. A completely different scene emerges. A sketched-out battle, a different face, or entire figures that were painted over because, I don't know, the patron changed their mind or the political climate shifted.
Or the artist just had a radically different idea halfway through the job.
Yeah. The canvas is suddenly a battlefield of revisions.
It ceases to be a single image. It becomes basically a deeply layered archaeological site.
Which is wild to think about.
It is. We naturally prefer things to be visible and straightforward. I mean, it's easier that way. But the reality of history, especially ancient history, is often just a series of overlapping edits.
And that is exactly what happens when you step into the world of early Christian texts.
The ultimate overlapping edits.
Seriously, suddenly that X-ray machine flips on, and we are looking at a textual landscape that is incredibly murky.
Very murky.
It is filled with hidden layers, suppressed voices, editorial mysteries. So today, we are going to take you on a deep dive into the hidden strata of early Christianity.
It's a fascinating area.
It really is. We're focusing specifically on the Johannine traditions. So everything associated with the Apostle John and the deeply, deeply misunderstood figure of Mary Magdalene.
To do this, we are drawing from a pretty diverse stack of sources today.
Yeah, what have we got?
Well, we're looking at recent theological analyses from journals like Melita Theologica, plus extensive research on the texts of the Nag Hammadi library.
The famous clay jars.
Exactly. And we're bringing in translated excerpts of suppressed scriptures, like the Apocryphon of John and the Gospel of Mary.
Which are just mind-blowing texts.
They really are. But we are also going to look at cutting-edge contemporary research, things involving artificial intelligence and a field called stylometry.
Stylometry.
Yeah, which researchers are using right now to decode the stylistic fingerprints of these ancient texts.
Okay, let's unpack this. The mission here is to help you navigate this whole textual labyrinth. We want to look at how a cornerstone text, like the Gospel of John, was actually heavily edited over decades.
Heavily edited.
Right, and how modern AI is stepping in to do the work of, 1,000 textual scholars.
You're changing the whole game.
And finally, how these lost Gnostic texts present a radically different, deeply experiential path to divine knowledge.
It's a lot of ground to cover.
It is. So let's start with the canvas itself, the Gospel of John.
Okay.
When you read it straight through, it's supposed to be this soaring, spiritual, cohesive story. Right?
It's the intention, yes.
It's the gospel with the famous I am statements. But scholars have been fighting for over a century about what they call the Johannine question.
Yes, the infamous Johannine question, which is, at its core, the debate over how the Gospel of John was actually composed.
Because it's kind of a puzzle.
It's a huge puzzle. The text we have today feels both unified in its really lofty theology, but also incredibly fractured in its actual narrative construction.
Fractured is a good word for it.
Yeah, and within this debate, you generally have two main analytical approaches. The first is what scholars call the synchronic approach.
Synchronic.
This is when you read the text exactly as it exists today, as a smooth, holistic narrative.
Like reading a normal book.
Exactly. You look at the final product and analyze it as the work of a masterful storyteller. You study the irony, the complex symbolism, the character development.
You just treat it like a finished, intentional novel.
Right. But the other approach, and the one that really gets that X-ray machine whirring, is the diachronic approach.
And this is where it gets messy.
Very. This is looking at the text not as a single, smooth piece of writing, but as something that evolved over time.
Like a living document.
Exactly. A text that was patched together, edited, and expanded over a long period to respond to very specific historical situations.
And the reason scholars are forced to take this diachronic approach is because the Gospel of John is absolutely full of what literary critics call aporias.
Yes, aporias.
Can you break that down?
Sure. In literary criticism, an aporia is basically an irresolvable internal contradiction, or a logical disjunction in a text.
Like a glitch in the matrix.
Kind of, yeah. It's an editorial seam. It's the moment where the narrative suddenly trips over its own feet.
Where the underlying editing just becomes totally visible to the naked eye if you are paying close enough attention. So let's look at a concrete example because John is loaded with them. The one that completely shatters the illusion of a single author just, sitting at a desk writing a continuous story is in chapter 14.
Oh, this is a classic one.
It's so awkward when you notice it. So Jesus is in the upper room, right? He's in the middle of this beautiful, intimate discourse with his disciples.
He's talking about the Holy Spirit.
Right. And then at verse 31, he says quite clearly, "Rise, let us go hence."
Yes. The Greek is egereste, agamenentuthen, meaning literally, get up, we are leaving this room right now.
Right. It is an explicit command to change locations. So you would naturally expect the very next verse to describe them walking out the door.
Living toward the Garden of Gethsemane. Yeah.
But instead, the discourse just keeps going.
It just doesn't stop.
Jesus continues speaking for 3 more entire chapters, chapters 15, 16, and 17.
Delivering this massive high priestly prayer.
Exactly. Before they actually finally leave the room in chapter 18, it's like a movie where a character says, "Let's get out of here," and then stands absolutely still.
It's just frozen.
Yeah, delivering a monologue for another 45 minutes while everyone just awkwardly waits by the door holding their coats.
It's a glaring structural seam, and what's fascinating here is that that's far from the only one.
Oh, there's so many.
There's a massive geographical anomaly between chapters 5, 6, and 7.
The teleporting Jesus.
Basically. So in chapter 5, Jesus is in Jerusalem healing a man by the pool of Bethesda. The text is very clear about the location.
Right.
But then chapter 6 opens with the phrase, "After these things, Jesus went over the Sea of Galilee."
Wait, but Jerusalem is down in Judea? Way in the south. The Sea of Galilee is roughly 70 miles to the north.
It's not a short walk.
No, that is a multi-day journey on foot through incredibly difficult terrain in the ancient world. And the text provides zero transition.
None. No explanation of how or why he suddenly teleported there.
And then it gets even weirder, right?
Right. To make it even more convoluted, in chapter 7, Jesus is back in Jerusalem.
Teleported back.
And he is referencing the healing he did at the pool of Bethesda back in chapter 5 as if it had literally just happened yesterday.
So the flow of the argument makes absolutely no sense with chapter 6 just wedged in the middle there.
Yeah. But if you took a pair of scissors and swapped the order of chapters 5 and 6,
just literally cut and pasted them,
the chronology and the geography of the narrative would suddenly snap into perfect logical sense.
It is the ultimate editorial oops. But this makes me wonder, if it's so glaring, why wouldn't the early church just fix it?
That's a great question.
Like, if a scribe in the 3rd century saw that this was obviously out of order, why not just swap the chapters back?
Well, because by the time these glaring errors were really recognized by later readers, the text had already achieved a status of sacredness. You don't just take scissors to a document that your community has decided is divinely inspired, even if it has geographical hiccups.
So the text just became frozen in its final messy state.
Exactly. And we have to remember, these aren't just minor typos or geographical errors. They're profound thematic inconsistencies, too.
Like what?
Well, in some passages, the text seems deeply sacramental, heavily emphasizing the physical rituals of baptism and the Eucharist.
Okay, very physical.
But then in other passages, it seems almost anti-sacramental, focusing purely on a spiritualized internal faith where physical rituals don't seem to matter at all.
Which totally brings us to Raymond E. Brown.
Yes, a giant in the field.
For anyone who doesn't know, Brown was this towering figure in biblical scholarship, a Catholic priest, and just a brilliant textual detective.
Absolute genius.
He looked at all these aporias, these scenes and contradictions, and he proposed a highly sophisticated 5-stage theory for how the Gospel of John was actually composed.
And when you walk through his stages, the text really starts to feel like a contested, multi-generational Wikipedia page.
That's exactly what it feels like.
The brilliance of Brown's approach is that he doesn't view these edits as sloppy writing or accidents.
He doesn't think it's just bad editing.
No. What's fascinating here is that he views them as the living footprint of an evolving community.
The Johannine community.
Right. This wasn't one isolated genius in a cave writing a book in a weekend. It was an entire community of believers trying to navigate severe historical and theological crises over several generations.
And they were updating their sacred texts to reflect those battles. Let's break down these stages because it honestly completely changes how you read the document.
Sure. So in Brown Stage 1, you just have the independent traditional material, the raw data.
The core memories.
Yeah. These are the words and deeds of Jesus existing independently from the traditions that would eventually form the other Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke.
And call those other three the Synoptic Gospels, right?
Correct, because they largely share the same sequence of events and can be seen together. That's what synoptic means.
But the Johannine material was different from the very beginning.
Very different. It had different miracles, like turning water into wine, and a totally different timeline, like having Jesus visit Jerusalem multiple times instead of just once at the very end of his life.
Okay, so that's stage 1, the raw material.
Yeah.
Then we move to stage 2.
Yes. Stage 2 is the development of this raw material through preaching and teaching over several decades.
So the community is oral at this point.
Mostly, yes. They are taking these isolated stories and working them into a specific Johannine style.
They were turning simple miracle stories into elaborate short dramas.
Exactly. And they are taking short sayings of Jesus and expanding them into those long philosophical discourses that John is so famous for.
So this stage is crucial because it's where the community's unique theology is really forged.
Right. But like you said, they were still largely an oral culture. Then stage 3 is where it finally gets put to paper.
The first draft.
Brown calls this the first edition. A master theologian within the community takes all this preached material and weaves it into a consecutive written gospel narrative.
So we finally have a book. But the story doesn't end there, does it?
Not at all. Because the community's real-world situation changed drastically.
Which brings us to stage 4, the second edition.
Right. That same master evangelist had to go back and revise the text, expanding it significantly because the community was dealing with major socio-historical traumas.
And we can actually see the scars of those traumas right in the text.
You really can. For instance, they were clashing heavily with followers of John the Baptist.
Wait, really? John the Baptist had his own followers competing with Jesus's.
Yes. There was a rival sect in the first century who believed that John the Baptist, not Jesus, was the true Messiah.
Wow.
So the evangelist goes back into the text and basically beefs up the prologue. They explicitly add lines that say, he, meaning John the Baptist, was not that light, but was sent to bear witness of that light.
So they are literally using the text to win a contemporary theological turf war.
Exactly. But an even bigger trauma was their relationship with the broader Jewish community.
Because the Johannine community consisted of Jewish believers in Jesus, right?
Yes. But they were being painfully expelled from their local synagogues. There was a historical development often associated with the Birkat Haminim, which was a curse on heretics introduced into synagogue liturgy.
To flush out the Jewish Christians.
Precisely. And you see this trauma injected directly into the gospel. The phrase, put out of the synagogue, appears multiple times in John.
The Greek word is apostanagogos.
Yes. And it reflects the agonizing social reality of the evangelist's time around the year 90 CE far more than it reflects the historical reality of Jesus's actual ministry in the year 30 CE.
So the text was being updated to address the immediate burning pain of a community being exiled from its religious home.
It was a coping mechanism as much as a historical record.
It's incredible to think of a sacred text being utilized almost like a living newsletter to address real-time community crises.
It really is.
But the most drastic changes, the ones that create those massive aporias we talked about earlier, those happen in stage 5.
Yes. Brown argues that a final redaction was done by an outside editor, someone completely different from the main evangelist.
A completely new guy.
Right. This final redactor is the one who stitched in older, unused material to try and harmonize the text, or to save scraps of tradition that had been left out of the earlier editions.
And this redactor wasn't just fixing typos, were they?
No, we are talking about major, iconic parts of the gospel. According to Brown and many subsequent scholars, this final redactor is likely the one who added the entire story of the raising of Lazarus in chapters 11 and 12.
Wait, I have to stop you there. The raising of Lazarus.
Yes.
That is one of the most famous stories in the entire Bible. It is the emotional climax of the gospel where Jesus weeps. Are you saying that was just patched in at the very end of the editing process?
It is highly probable. When you analyze the structural flow, the Lazarus story acts as a massive disruption.
How so?
Well, think about the synoptic gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. The event that triggers the authorities to arrest and crucify Jesus is his cleansing of the temple.
Right, he overturns the tables, disrupts the financial flow of the temple, and that is the final straw for the authorities.
Exactly. But in the Gospel of John, the event that triggers the crucifixion is the raising of Lazarus.
Oh, wow. I never realized that.
Yeah, the authorities see this massive miracle, panic about the crowds following him, and decide he has to die.
So because the redactor shoved the Lazarus story in there to act as the catalyst for the Passion narrative, it must have caused a massive structural domino effect.
Precisely. If Lazarus is now the trigger for the crucifixion at the end of the narrative, what do you do with the temple cleansing story?
You can't have two final straws.
Right. So the redactor had to take that temple cleansing story and bump it all the way to the very beginning of the book in chapter 2.
That makes so much sense. That's why John's timeline is so weirdly out of sync with the other Gospels.
Exactly. And this same editor is likely the one who took the high priestly prayer and shoved it into the middle of the Last Supper, creating that awkward, let's get out of here moment we discussed earlier.
The guy standing by the door for 40 minutes.
We got it. They also tacked on the entirety of chapter 21 as an epilogue to tie up loose ends about the fates of the apostles Peter and the beloved disciple.
It completely revolutionizes how you view the document. It shifts it from being a flawless dictation handed down from heaven to a deeply human, historically scarred, layered text.
It's a much richer text when you see the scars.
And for decades, scholars like Raymond Brown and Robert Fortna spent their entire lives reading Greek manuscripts, manually spotting these tiny grammatical seams,
Tracking vocabulary shifts by hand.
arguing over these stages. It was painstaking, lifelong manual labor.
It relied heavily on human intuition and an encyclopedic knowledge of ancient Greek syntax.
But the way we do that work is fundamentally changing right now.
Radically changing.
Which brings us to the next massive shift in our deep dives today. While human scholars spent lifetimes spotting those scenes with their own eyes, we are now entering an era where machines can spot them in seconds.
It's incredible what's happening.
We are talking about artificial intelligence and stylometry. Modern digital humanities, specifically projects like the Coptica project at Humboldt University in Berlin, are applying massive computational power to these ancient mysteries.
The operative term here, and it's an important one, is stylometry.
Stylometry?
Right. Stylometry is the statistical analysis of variations in literary style between one writer and another.
Okay.
The foundational premise is that every author has a subconscious linguistic fingerprint.
Now, I want to make sure we really understand this mechanism. When we talk about a linguistic fingerprint, we aren't talking about the ideas the author is expressing, right?
No, not at all.
We aren't talking about whether they write about love or war or theology.
Exactly. We are talking about the structural scaffolding of their language. Think of it like a telegraph operator in the 19th century.
Okay, I like this analogy.
Every operator had a distinct rhythm when they tapped out Morse code. They actually called it their fist.
Their fist.
Yeah. Even if two operators were sending the exact same message, a trained ear could tell who was tapping it based on the micropauses between the dashes and dots.
Oh, that's fascinating.
So stylometry is basically looking for the fist of an author.
So what does a writer's fist look like to a computer? Like, what is it actually measuring?
It looks at the rate at which you use function words versus content words.
Function versus content.
Right. Content words are the nouns and verbs, things like God, world, love, crucify. Those change depending on the topic you're writing about.
Makes sense.
But function words are the invisible glue. Prepositions, conjunctions, articles, words like and, but with, to.
Oh, I see.
You don't consciously think about how many times you use the word and in a sentence. It's totally subconscious.
But an AI can calculate that frequency with devastating mathematical accuracy.
Exactly. It measures the length of your sentences, the specific clusters of words you tend to use together, and your syntactic anomalies.
And researchers are currently pointing these AI stylometry tools directly at the biblical texts. Specifically, they've been using them to analyze the Gospel of John and the Book of Revelation.
Yes.
Now, church tradition has historically claimed for nearly 2,000 years that both of these books were written by the exact same person.
John the Apostle, the son of Zebedee.
Right. But when the machines look at it, they tell a completely different story.
A vastly different story. The AI runs statistical analyses, things like n-gram profiles.
What's an n-gram?
An engram is just a contiguous sequence of n items from a given sample of text. So a 3-gram would be a specific sequence of 3 words.
Like, and then Jesus.
Exactly. The AI counts the frequencies of these engrams and performs syntactical clustering. And what it finds heavily supports the idea that the Book of Revelation and the Gospel of John were written by completely different authors.
Wait, can we drill down into that for a second? What exactly is the AI seeing in the Greek that proves they are different authors? If they are both written in ancient Greek and both deal with Christian themes, how different can they really be?
Mathematically, they are worlds apart. Yes. The Greek of the Gospel of John is relatively smooth. It uses a lot of abstract philosophical terminology, logos, light, life, truth. It has a very specific, elevated way of linking sentences together.
Okay.
But the Greek of the Book of Revelation is notoriously rough.
Rough in what way?
It is highly idiosyncratic. It's filled with syntactic anomalies. What scholars used to politely call solecisms, which is essentially just a fancy word for grammatical errors.
Grammatical errors, like the author of Revelation didn't know Greek very well?
Yes, or that their first language was Semitic like Aramaic or Hebrew, and they were translating their thought processes into Greek in a very clunky, literal way.
Oh, that's really interesting.
For instance, the AI can detect a massive difference in how the two texts use parataxes versus hypotaxis.
Okay, you're going to have to define those.
Sure, parataxis is stringing sentences together with coordinating conjunctions, like, and this happened, and then I saw this.
Very repetitive.
Exactly. The Book of Revelation uses the Greek word kai, which means and, at a statistically overwhelming rate compared to the Gospel of John.
So the AI maps all these usage rates out.
Yes, using techniques like principal component analysis. The AI plots the vocabulary and syntax onto high-dimensional graphs.
A high-dimensional graph.
Imagine a 3D scatter plot, but with hundreds of dimensions instead of just 3.
My brain hurts just trying to picture that.
Right, and it shows that the textual data points for the John of Revelation and the John of the Gospel cluster in completely different mathematical universes.
So the AI isn't reading the texts for meaning or theology at all?
Not at all. It doesn't care about the plot involving the beast or the 7 seals. It is using embedding-based parallel searches to find latent motif clusters.
Latent motif clusters.
Hidden thematic groupings that humans miss because we read linearly from left to right, but the machine reads the entire corpus multidimensionally, all simultaneously.
But I have to play devil's advocate here for a second, because we've all seen modern AI, like large language models, mess up basic facts.
Oh, absolutely. The hallucinations.
Right. If an AI can't figure out how many R's are in the word strawberry, how does it read a dead language like Coptic or ancient Greek without hallucinating data? How can we actually trust it to analyze a fragmented papyrus from 2,000 years ago?
It is a really critical concern, and it's exactly why this work is being done by specialized academic teams using bespoke models, not just your off-the-shelf commercial chatbots.
Okay, so it's a different kind of tech.
Yes. The key to avoiding hallucinations in this specific field is that they aren't asking the AI to interpret the meaning of the text. They are asking it to categorize mathematical data, and they build what are called gold standards.
What's a gold standard in this context?
It's a meticulously human annotated data set. So scholars take a text, and human experts perfectly align the Greek, the Coptic translation, and the modern language equivalents.
So the humans do the hard groundwork first.
Exactly. They tag every single word for its part of speech, its grammatical case, its lemma. They build a flawless, rigidly controlled data set.
And then they train the AI on that.
Right. The algorithms are trained on these gold standards under heavy human oversight. So when the model is finally turned loose on a new text, it has an incredibly rigid mathematical framework to operate within. It can't just make things up.
And I read that they're actually using these models not just to analyze existing texts, but to physically repair damaged ones. Is that true?
This is one of the most exciting applications right now.
How does that even work?
Well, many ancient manuscripts, particularly papyri, have physical holes in them. We call them lacunae.
Right, from worms or rot.
Exactly. Where the material has degraded or worms have eaten through it or it was torn in antiquity, we are missing chunks of words or sometimes entire sentences.
And the AI fills in the blanks.
Yes. Using contextual language models, which are similar to the architecture behind modern LLMs, but trained exclusively on ancient languages, the AI calculates the mathematical probability of which words would fit into that specific physical hole.
That is wild.
It takes into account the surrounding syntax, the specific stylistic fingerprint of the author we just talked about, and even the physical line length and average letter width of the scribe's handwriting.
Wait, it calculates how wide the letters are?
Yes, to predict the missing text with staggering accuracy. Because if the word is too long, it literally wouldn't fit in the physical hole on the papyrus.
Wow, it's like having a million Raymond Browns reading the text simultaneously, armed with calculators and rulers.
That's a great way to put it.
But this raises a huge, highly speculative question regarding theology.
Okay, lay it on me.
If AI can mathematically, definitively separate the voice of the original evangelist from the later redactor, if we can eventually put a manuscript into a machine and it highlights a verse in red and says, mathematical probability indicates this was added 50 years later by a different author, how does that change things?
That is the million-dollar question.
It forces every reader, every theologian, to reconsider what constitutes the authentic text. Do we value the final, stitched-together canonical version because that's what history gave us? Or do we dig for the original historical voice hidden underneath?
It completely destabilizes the idea of biblical inerrancy, at least in a literalist sense.
Yeah.
But what's fascinating here is that the AI tools being developed for this aren't just being used on the canonical Bible.
Right.
They are particularly vital for analyzing the massive trove of non-canonical texts discovered in 1945 at Nag Hammadi in Egypt.
The Nag Hammadi Library. This is the perfect pivot, because if AI is showing us that the institutional church was heavily editing and rewriting text to create a unified brand,
Yes.
what happens to the texts that refused to be edited? What happened to the material that didn't fit the consensus?
Well, they were branded as heretical, and they were hunted down.
Until a lucky strike in 1945.
Exactly. In 1945, an Egyptian peasant named Muhammad Ali al-Saman was digging for fertilizer near the town of Nag Hammadi, and his mattock struck a large sealed clay jar.
Just buried in the dirt.
Buried in the dirt, and inside that jar were 13 leather-bound papyrus codices containing over 50 texts.
50 texts. That had just been lost to history.
Lost for over a millennium. These were texts that had been buried, likely by monks in the 4th century, to hide them from the Orthodox Church authorities who were actively purging non-canonical books.
And applying these digital tools to the Coptic texts of the Nag Hammadi Library is opening up entirely new ways to understand the wild diversity of early Christianity.
It's giving us a window into a totally different world.
Which leads us to one of the most mind-bending, incredible texts ever pulled out of that clay jar. A text that actually bears the name John, but tells a story that the Orthodox Church tried desperately to erase.
Yes. Let's look at the Apocryphon of John, also known as the Secret Book of John.
So what exactly is this text?
The Apocryphon of John is a 2nd century text belonging to a complex theological movement that scholars often call Sethian Gnosticism.
Sethian Gnosticism.
Right, and it was incredibly important to them. We know this because 4 different Coptic manuscript copies survived.
4 copies is a lot for an underground text.
Exactly. 3 were found in the Nag Hammadi Library and 1 in the Berlin Codex. There are 2 short versions and 2 long versions, which shows us that it was widely copied, circulated, and heavily expanded upon by different communities.
Okay, so let's set the scene for the listener, because the framing of this text is incredibly dramatic. It does not read like a normal gospel.
Not at all.
It starts with John the Apostle, but he is in a state of profound grief and bewilderment right after the crucifixion. He's walking up to the temple in Jerusalem, and he gets confronted by a Pharisee named Arminius.
Right.
And Arminius essentially mocks him. He says, "Where's your master? Your Savior lied to you. He closed your mind. He turned you away from the traditions of your fathers, and now he's just abandoned you."
It is a moment of profound psychological and spiritual crisis. John isn't presented here as an unshakable pillar of faith.
No, he's totally broken.
He is devastated. He is questioning everything. So he wanders off away from the temple into a mountainous desert place, completely lost and doubting his entire experience with Jesus.
And this crisis of the character John is really a stand-in for the crisis of the 2nd century church, right?
Sure.
Trying to figure out what it all meant when the physical Jesus was gone.
Exactly. It's expressing a deep existential panic.
But then the heavens literally rip open.
The whole creation shakes.
And Christ appears to John, but not as a human man with nail scars. He appears as a shape-shifting, blinding light.
The text is so trippy here.
It really is. The text says John sees a child, then an old man, then a young man, all existing simultaneously within this luminous presence. And Christ tells John, "I am the Father, I am the Mother, and I am the Son. I have come to teach you what is, what was, and what will be.
And what follows that introduction is a cosmological narrative that is so radically different from Orthodox Christianity, it honestly reads like epic science fiction.
It really does. It completely rewrites the book of Genesis.
It attempts to answer the ultimate question. If God is entirely good, why is the material world so full of suffering and evil?
Right. And in the Apocryphon, the ultimate true God is not the angry, judging creator of the Old Testament.
No, totally different entity.
The true God is called the monad.
The monad.
And the way the text describes the monad is pure apophatic theology, which means describing God by what God is not.
Right, stripping away all human concepts.
It says the monad is so perfect, absolute, and ineffable that you can't even describe it. It is not corporeal, not incorporeal. It is not large, not small. It exists outside of time and space in perfect self-sufficient peace.
The monad is just pure, incomprehensible light. And from this monad, divine entities begin to emanate, almost like light shining and refracting from a star.
Like a cascade.
Exactly. The first emanation is Barbelo, the mother, or the first thought.
Okay, Barbella.
From her comes Autogenes, the self-begotten son. They form a divine triad, and then from them come a multitude of other perfect spiritual beings, which they call eons.
Eons.
Right. This entire harmonious divine realm is called the pleroma, which translates to the fullness.
It's this beautiful cascading waterfall of divine geometry. Everyone is happy. But then disaster strikes.
The fall.
And it comes from the lowest, youngest eon in the pleroma, whose name is Sophia, which translates to wisdom.
Yes. So
Sophia wants to emanate an image of herself, to create something out of her own power. But she does it without the consent of the ultimate monad, and crucially, without a male consort.
she acts unilaterally.
Right. And because she acts out of alignment with the divine harmony, she produces something flawed, something monstrous.
The text describes her offspring as a terrifying anomaly.
It's so creepy.
It is. He has the face of a lion and the body of a serpent, with eyes flashing like lightning. His name is Yaldabaoth. He is the demiurge, the craftsman.
And Sophia is so horrified by what she has accidentally created out of her own ignorance and ambition that she casts him out of the pleroma. She hides him in a luminous cloud so none of the other divine perfect beings can see him.
She's basically hiding her mistake.
Exactly. And this is where the theology turns everything we know upside down. Yaldabaoth, because he is cut off from the pleroma and hidden in this cloud, doesn't know about the true ultimate God above him.
He thinks he is alone.
Right. He is arrogant, ignorant, and incredibly powerful. So he steals some of his mother's divine power and creates his own realm. He creates the archons, demonic rulers, to help him govern.
The managers of his weird little universe.
Yeah. And then he creates the material universe, our physical world, the planets, the earth, and eventually human bodies.
And then comes the theological punchline.
Drop the punchline.
Yaldabaoth looks at his flawed material creation, and in his complete blindness he declares, "I am a jealous God, and there is no other God beside me."
Which is a direct verbatim quote from the God of the Old Testament in the book of Exodus.
Precisely. If we connect this to the broader context of the text we discussed earlier, you can see exactly why the Orthodox Church hunted this text down.
Yeah, no kidding.
And why it was buried in a jar. The Apocryphon of John is taking the Orthodox narrative and turning it entirely inside out. Just think about how this compares to the canonical Johannine texts.
The contrast is jarring.
It really is. The Book of Revelation is an eschatological text about a cosmic war against Satan and demons, leading to the ultimate triumph of the Creator God, who will rule a new heaven and a new earth.
The Creator is the good guy in Revelation.
Right. But the Apocryphon argues that the Creator God is the problem.
The Creator is the bad guy.
Exactly. The material world isn't a beautiful creation that was merely marred by human sin. It is fundamentally a flawed prison. It was created by an arrogant, ignorant tyrant specifically to trap the divine spark that humans carry inside them.
It's literally the ancient blueprint for the Matrix or the Truman Show.
It really is.
Long before modern pop culture, the Gnostics were saying the world around you, the physical laws, the social structures, it's an illusion created by a false lesser god to keep you enslaved and ignorant of your true origins. And the only way out is to wake up.
And notice how the Apocryphon intentionally positions itself against the canonical Gospel of John.
How so?
Well, in the canonical Gospel, Jesus promises to send the Paraclete, the Spirit of Truth, to guide you into all truth. The Apocryphon steps up and essentially says, I am the fulfillment of that promise. I am the inner truth. It uses all the same high theological terminology, the light, the word, the descending spirit, to entirely subvert the Orthodox teachings.
Wow.
It claims to be the secret esoteric teaching that Jesus only gave to his absolute closest initiates.
But we have to ask the historical question here. Why write this? Why create this elaborate, complex myth that portrays the creator of the material world as an ignorant tyrant? What was going on in the 2nd century that made this appealing?
Many modern scholars view Sethian Gnosticism not just as a weird theological divergence, but as a profound sociopolitical critique.
Okay, critique of who?
In the ancient Mediterranean, the Roman emperors, the local governors, and increasingly the Orthodox bishops claimed that their authority was divinely sanctioned by the Creator.
God put them in charge.
Exactly. They claimed that the hierarchical, often oppressive structure of society, the patriarchy, the slavery, the heavy taxation, that this was all just the natural order of a good creation.
So to attack the creator is to basically attack the empire.
Exactly. By portraying the creator of this world as a malevolent, flawed, arrogant being, the Gnostics were directly delegitimizing the earthly Roman authorities and institutions.
That is a dangerous game to play back then.
Extremely dangerous. They were saying to the marginalized, the people who rule you, the institutions that demand your obedience and your money, they are modeled after an arrogant, ignorant God. Their laws are archontic laws.
Don't reject them.
Right. The true God, the monad, is pure, liberating light and has absolutely nothing to do with this worldly oppression.
It is a theology of ultimate rebellion. But there is a textual quirk in the Apocryphon that I find absolutely fascinating, especially considering what we talked about with the Gospel of John being heavily edited.
I think I know where you're going with this.
I mentioned earlier that there were 4 copies found, some short and some long.
Yes.
The long version of the Apocryphon of John has this massive section spliced right into the middle of it that isn't in the short versions at all.
Yes, the Melethesia.
Right, the Melethesia. It's this highly detailed, honestly incredibly tedious astrological account of exactly which demons created which specific body parts of the first human, Adam.
It goes on forever.
It goes on for pages, like the demon flocks made the left kneecap, the demon shoe made the right elbow, this demon made the liver, that one made the spleen.
Very specific.
And scholars have figured out exactly where the authors stole this from. It's lifted almost verbatim from a non-Christian Persian text called the Book of Zoroaster.
They just took an existing astrological magical text and dropped it right into their Christian revelation.
But doesn't this totally undermine the text? I mean, if I'm reading a supposed divine revelation from the resurrected Christ, and halfway through the author just copy-pastes a Persian anatomy textbook into it, isn't this basically just ancient fan fiction?
I can see why you'd say that.
Like they're just mashing up whatever philosophical trends sound cool.
Yeah.
How can anyone take it seriously as theology?
Well, it certainly looks like plagiarism to our modern eyes, right? Because we are obsessed with copyright, intellectual property, and singular original authorship.
True.
But in antiquity, the concept of truth operated on a completely different paradigm. Truth wasn't about rigid proprietary borders. It was about bricolage.
Bricolage.
Right, constructing something out of a diverse range of available things.
So stealing from Zoroaster wasn't a bug, it was a feature.
Precisely. If a Gnostic teacher, steeped in Middle Platonism, found a profound philosophical concept in Plato's Timaeus, or a detailed astrological map of the body in Zoroastrianism, or a compelling narrative in Genesis.
They just incorporated it.
They incorporated it.
Yeah.
For them, truth was a tapestry. Their ultimate goal was to map the soul's perilous journey out of the material trap, past the planetary archons, and back to the divine pleroma.
And they needed the best maps available.
Exactly. If the Book of Zoroaster had the best available schematic of how the physical body was constructed as a prison, they wove it right into their Christian theology. It wasn't intellectual theft. It was synthesis.
They were just building the ultimate escape manual.
Exactly. An attempt to build the most comprehensive, scientifically and philosophically up-to-date map of reality possible to aid in the soul's liberation.
And the ultimate goal of that map, the core of this entire movement, was to shift the locus of authority.
Yes.
Because canonical Christianity, as it was developing under figures like Bishop Irenaeus, increasingly focused on external salvation. You are saved by Jesus dying on the physical cross for your sins. You hope for a bodily resurrection. And in the meantime, you just obey the external authority of the bishops and partake in the physical sacraments.
But the Apocryphon of John shifts the focus entirely to internal awakening, what they call gnosis knowledge.
But not intellectual knowledge.
No, experiential, transformative insight. You don't need a priest or a bishop to save you. You need to remember the divine spark that is already buried inside yourself. You need to wake up.
And this demand for deeply internal, unmediated access to the divine brings us to our final text today, because this concept of internal awakening was championed most fiercely by another massively suppressed figure from the Nag Hammadi texts.
A very famous figure.
A figure who has been perhaps more misunderstood than any other in Christian history.
We are, of course, talking about Mary Magdalene and the Gospel of Mary.
Yes. If there is anyone in history who desperately needs a retroactive PR team, it is Mary of Magdala.
She really does.
For nearly 2,000 years, the dominant narrative, the one preached from countless Orthodox pulpits, painted by Renaissance masters, and codified in popular culture, was that she was a repentant prostitute.
Right.
A fallen, sexually sinful woman whom Jesus mercifully saved from a life of degradation. But when you look at the actual historical evidence, the Greek texts, and especially the suppressed Gnostic texts, that narrative completely evaporates.
It vanishes.
It is a total fabrication.
It is entirely a theological fiction, and we can actually trace exactly when and how that fiction was officially cemented.
When did it happen?
It happened in the year 591 CE, during an Easter sermon delivered by Pope Gregory the Great.
Pope Gregory. Okay.
In that homily, Gregory conflated 3 distinct women from the Gospels into one composite character.
3 different women.
Yes. He took Mary of Bethany, who is the sister of Martha and Lazarus. He took Mary Magdalene, and he took an unnamed sinful woman who washes Jesus' feet with her tears in the Gospel of Luke.
And he just mashed them together.
He just mashed them together. He declared them all to be the exact same person.
Wow.
It was a merging of characters that had zero historical or textual basis. But it served a very specific utilitarian purpose for the developing, male-dominated, ascetic church.
What was the purpose?
Well, by branding Mary Magdalene as a repentant whore, it marginalized her authority. It turned her from a visionary leader into a symbol of penitence and subjection.
Wow. That is quite the demotion.
It really is. But in the early Christian texts, particularly the Gnostic tradition, she holds a title that is vastly different and honestly incredibly threatening to a patriarchal hierarchy.
What's the title?
She is the Apostle to the Apostles.
Apostle to the Apostles. I love that. In texts like the Gospel of Mary, which unfortunately we only have fragments of, she is not a weeping marginal figure begging for forgiveness.
Not at all.
She is an initiate. She is a spiritual teacher who understood the inner esoteric meaning of Jesus' teachings better than any of the male disciples.
She's the one who really gets it.
But I want to address the canonical text for a second, because even if she wasn't a prostitute, the canonical Gospel of Luke specifically says that Jesus cast 7 demons out of her.
Yes, that is in the text.
Doesn't that imply that she was deeply troubled or possessed or sinful before she met him?
Well, in the Orthodox literal reading, yes. It portrays her as someone who was possessed by literal evil spirits and needed an exorcism. But in the esoteric, Platonic, and Gnostic traditions of late antiquity, those 7 demons are interpreted entirely differently.
So.
They aren't little monsters. They are often associated with the 7 planetary spheres or the passions of the soul.
Okay, the passions.
They represent the 7 deadly sins or the egoic attachments: pride, lust, envy, anger, covetousness, gluttony, and sloth.
So they are psychological or energetic blockages?
Exactly. And Jesus casting them out isn't a spooky exorcism. It is a process of profound energetic and spiritual purification.
That makes so much sense in this context.
Right. In ancient mystical frameworks, those dark aspects of her shadow are systematically transformed into the corresponding 7 virtues: humility, charity, chastity, gratitude, temperance, patience, and diligence.
So rather than being a broken sinner, the casting out of the 7 demons signifies that Mary underwent a complete, holistic spiritual purification.
Precisely. She mastered the passions. She became a perfectly clear, unblemished vessel, capable of receiving and understanding the highest, most undiluted divine truths.
She wasn't the most broken person. She was the most thoroughly sanctified and prepared person in the narrative.
Exactly.
Which completely reframes one of the most famous, iconic scenes in the entire Bible.
The tomb scene.
Yes, the morning of the resurrection. According to the Gospel of John, Mary is the first one at the tomb. She is the first witness. She sees the risen Jesus and reaches out to him. And in the King James Version of John 20:17, Jesus says to her, "Touch me not."
In the Latin Vulgate, it's the famous phrase, noli me tangere.
Right. And for centuries, this was interpreted by the church as Jesus saying, stay away, you are unclean, you are a woman, you are still carrying the taint of the earth, do not defile my resurrected body.
Yes.
Art history is full of paintings showing a radiant, aloof Jesus pulling away from a lowly, dirty Mary who's groveling in the dirt.
But we have to look at the Greek here.
What does Greek say?
The phrase in Greek is momu haptu. It is a present imperative. A much better, more accurate translation is stop holding on to me or do not cling to me.
So she's already embracing him.
Exactly. It implies an existing intimacy they are already touching. And when you read it through the lens of her being a purified, advanced initiate, the meaning shifts entirely.
He isn't rebuking her for being unclean.
Not at all. He is acknowledging his own intermediate spiritual state. He basically says, stop clinging to me, for I am not yet ascended to my Father.
So he's just in a state of cosmic transition.
Right, shifting from the earthly realm back to the divine pleroma. And instead of pushing her away in disgust, he gives her the ultimate authority.
He commissions her.
Yes. Go to my brethren and say unto them, I ascend unto my Father. She becomes the crucial bridge between the earthly and the divine realms. She is the one chosen to carry the gnosis to the others.
And the Gospel of Mary picks up on this exact dynamic. The text, as we have it, opens after the crucifixion. The male disciples are terrified.
Completely paralyzed by fear.
They are crying, hiding in a room, terrified that the Roman authorities are going to kick the doors in and crucify them too. And it's Mary who stands up.
She doesn't cower.
No. She comforts them, she turns their hearts toward the good, and she reminds them that the Savior's presence and grace are still with them. And then Peter, who is the absolute rock of the Orthodox institutional church, turns to her.
And what does he say?
He says, essentially, Sister, we know the Savior loved you more than the rest of women. Tell us the words of the Savior which you remember, the things which you know, but we do not.
It's an admission of her superior esoteric knowledge.
Yeah.
Right from Peter's mouth.
Exactly. And here's where the theology of the Gospel of Mary diverges so sharply from the developing Orthodox theology of the time. She doesn't just quote an old sermon of Jesus from the Galilean hills.
No, she recounts a visionary experience.
She explains that the Savior's true teaching isn't about the physical resurrection of the flesh or preparing to die as a martyr for the church. The true teaching is about the internal mechanics of salvation.
She describes the soul's ascent.
Yes, she outlines a detailed cosmic geography. She describes how the soul, after death or during deep mystical contemplation, must ascend past various malicious cosmic powers.
Powers of darkness, desire, ignorance, and wrath.
These are the archons we talked about earlier. Salvation, according to Mary's vision, is the soul breaking free from the fear of death and the heavy attachments of matter, answering the challenges of these archons with pure knowledge and discovering the divine good within.
And my absolute favorite part of her teaching, the part that feels so psychologically modern, is her explanation of how we actually perceive the divine.
Oh, this is a great part.
She asks Jesus in her vision, Lord, when someone sees a vision, do they see it through the soul or through the spirit?
It's a highly technical question about the anatomy of human consciousness, rooted in ancient Platonic and Stoic thought.
Exactly. And Jesus answers that it is neither.
Yeah,
right? The vision is not seen by the soul, and it's not seen by the spirit. It is seen by the mind, the nous that exists between them.
It's this profound psychological insight.
It really is.
Oh.
Divine visions aren't just raw, uncontrollable, irrational emotion, which was often associated with the soul or the passions in ancient thought. And they aren't just external spiritual lightning bolts hitting you from outside.
They are perceived by a centered, balanced consciousness.
Yes. A deeper perceptive faculty that bridges the gap between the earthly self and the divine spark.
But after Mary shares this incredibly beautiful, complex, empowering vision, we hit the central conflict of the text. How do the male disciples react to a woman delivering high theology?
Well, Peter and his brother Andrew completely reject her.
Of course they do.
Andrew speaks first and essentially says, I don't care what you say, these teachings are strange, and I don't believe the Savior said them. It sounds too different from what we know.
It's the classic conservative reaction to new revelation.
But Peter's attack is much more pointed and honestly deeply personal.
He attacks her authority based on her gender, doesn't he?
He does. He asks the others, can he really speak privately with a woman and not openly to us? Are we to turn about and all listen to her? Did he prefer her to us?
It is the ultimate display of fragile institutional ego.
Truly.
Put yourself in Mary's shoes for a second. You have done the hard inner work. You have purified your passions. You have had a profound, direct, undeniable, visionary experience of the divine.
You've attained gnosis.
Yes. And you shared in love to comfort your terrified friends. And a committee of men immediately tells you that your experience is invalid, simply because it didn't come through their official bureaucratic channels.
Because you are a woman.
Right. And therefore, in their worldview, incapable of receiving specialized revelation.
That scene perfectly encapsulates the historical socio-political clash that was tearing early Christianity apart in the 2nd and 3rd centuries.
Peter versus Mary.
Exactly. Peter, in these texts, is always a literary stand-in for the emerging Orthodox Church. He represents a system that is hierarchical, male-dominated, heavily invested in the authority of bishops, and focused on a literal physical resurrection that validates an apostolic chain of command.
And Mary represents the alternative.
Yes, Mary represents the Gnostic alternative. Her Christianity is egalitarian, experiential, focused on inner mysticism, and demands direct, unmediated access to the divine for every individual, regardless of gender.
And in the text, Levi, another disciple, stands up and fiercely defends her against Peter.
Thank goodness for Levi.
He rebukes Peter's jealousy, saying, "Peter, you have always been hot-tempered. You are arguing against the woman like the adversaries. If the Savior made her worthy, who are you to reject her? Surely the Savior knows her very well. That is why he loved her more than us."
Levi is arguing that spiritual authority is validated by inner spiritual maturity, not by external ecclesiastical office.
But as we know, history is written by the victors. The Peter faction won the historical war. The institutional church solidified its power under the Roman Empire, the canon of Scripture was rigidly closed, and texts like the Gospel of Mary and the Apocryphon of John were outlawed.
They were hunted down, burned, and eventually buried in clay jars in the Egyptian desert.
The inner mystical teaching was driven underground, replaced by dogma and hierarchy.
Driven underground, yes, but never entirely extinguished.
Ideas have a way of surviving.
They do. And what we're seeing today is a profound resurgence of interest in these texts. They aren't just dead historical artifacts for scholars to dissect. They are actively being used to shape modern religious life and challenge contemporary structures.
Like who? Who is using them today?
Well, for example, the Roman Catholic woman priests movement.
Okay, I've heard of them.
It's a modern global group of women who are defying canonical church law to seat ordination. And they look directly to the Gospel of Mary.
They see themselves in her story.
Absolutely. Reverend Dr. Bridget Mary Meehan, a bishop in the movement, describes the text as a mirror and a memory.
A mirror and a memory.
It reflects their current 21st century struggle against a male hierarchy that still questions their theological authority and their direct calling by the Spirit. It provides them with historical precedent.
That is so powerful.
It shows that gnosis, this inner contemplative knowing of God, this egalitarian vision of spiritual authority, has always been part of the tradition, flowing from Mary Magdalene through female mystics like Teresa of Avila right down to today.
It just shows how vital and living this reading practice is. We aren't just dusting off old Coptic scrolls. We are recovering suppressed voices that still have the power to disrupt and inspire today.
They are very much alive.
So let's pull all of these complex threads together, because the tapestry we've explored today is massive.
It really is a lot to take in.
We started with the canonical Gospel of John, assuming it was a pristine, untouched painting. But we learned that when you look closely at the aporias, the internal contradictions, it reveals itself to be a deeply layered labyrinth.
It was scarred by the traumas, the synagogue expulsions, and the theological edits of an evolving community trying to survive across multiple generations.
We then saw how modern technology is validating that diachronic approach. AI algorithms and stylometric analysis are shining a digital X-ray onto those ancient Greek pages.
Proving mathematically through syntax and function word frequencies that the John of the Gospel and the John of Revelation are fundamentally different voices.
The machines are confirming that different hands, different minds, stitched the early Christian tradition together.
Yes.
So we ventured out into the desert, into the texts that were cut out of the canon entirely by the Orthodox editors. The Apocryphon of John presented us with a mind-bending mythic cosmology.
It dared to suggest that the creator of the material world was a flawed, arrogant tyrant, offering a profound social critique of Roman imperial power and religious hierarchy.
While demanding that humans seek the pure, ineffable light of the monad.
Exactly.
And finally, we sat with Mary Magdalene, We stripped away the later papal smears that reduced her to a repentant prostitute, and we recognize her as the apostle to the apostles.
We explored her suppressed teachings in the Gospel of Mary, where she championed a faith based not on blind obedience to Peter's institutional authority, but on inner mystical empowerment.
She taught that salvation is an ascent, found by discovering the divine spark within your own nous, your own mind.
It is a sweeping journey from the exterior, historical battles over texts and institutional authority, straight into the interior, deeply personal quest for spiritual liberation.
And that, I think, is the core message for you, the listener. The search for meaning in these ancient texts isn't just about debating historical authorship or analyzing Greek syntax.
No, it's much bigger than that.
It's about taking Mary's advice. It's about looking past the external noise, the rigid rules, and the hierarchical societal structures, and finding the child of true humanity within yourself.
You beautifully said.
Before we sign off, I want to leave you with one final, incredible historical detail that proves how resilient these ideas are. We talked about how the Orthodox Church aggressively wiped out Gnosticism,
Driving it into the ground.
seemingly eradicating it by the 4th or 5th century. But historians and archaeologists have found evidence that the Apocryphon of John, that wild, world-reversing secret book with its alien cosmology, was still being secretly copied, studied, and used by a mysterious sect called the Audians.
In Mesopotamia,
Yes, all the way into the 8th century.
hundreds of years after it was supposedly wiped off the face of the earth, people were still risking their lives to read it, preserve it, and pass it on in the shadows.
Which leaves me with a thought to mull over. If an ancient, heretical text, buried in a clay jar in the Egyptian desert, could wait 1,500 years in the dark, only to be dug up and completely rewrite our understanding of early Christian history and the diversity of human belief.
What are we currently burying?
Exactly. What current, radical ideas or secret teachings of our modern age are we currently burying? What visionary voices are being pushed to the margins today, suppressed by our modern institutional algorithms, and buried in the digital clay jars of the internet?
It's a haunting thought.
When an AI archaeologist in the year 3500 runs an X-ray over the fragmented, corrupted data of the 21st century, what suppressed radical truths will they uncover about what we truly believed beneath the official narrative?
The layers of history are always infinitely deeper than the surface painting suggests. The truth is rarely found in the consensus. It's found in the revisions. We just have to be willing to look.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep seeking, keep asking the hard questions, and never be afraid to look beneath the paint. We'll see you next time.